Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I want to call the October 14th, 2020 meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission to order. I want to call it to order in honor of voting. Just want to remind people who are listening to us that you can vote if you've got your ballot. You've got two places to drop your ballot, Demuth and Palm Springs City Hall, for very safe voting, and then I will go to roll call.
Commissioners
Can I have a
Ervin,
vote?
Present.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Present.
Commissioner Lewin,
Present.
Commissioner Song,
Present.
Vice Chair Maruzzi is excused, and Chair Wormick.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Can I have a thank you. Can I have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, October the 8th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
And can I have a motion on the acceptance of the agenda?
I make a motion to accept the agenda.
Thank you.
I will second the motion to approve the agenda.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Ervin,
Yes.
Hirschbein,
Yes.
Lewin,
Wait, yes.
Song,
Yes.
and Wormick.
Yes. A question for the planning director. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
Madam Chair, we haven't had any members of the public request to speak under public comments.
Thank you. Then I can open and both close public comment section.
Correct.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is the consent calendar, and there is one item, Graciano Design for a major architectural application to construct a new 447 square foot single-family residence located at 2180 North Sunrise Way.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the consent calendar.
Yes. Is there a second?
I will second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Ervin,
Yes.
Hirschbein,
Yes.
Lewin,
Yes.
Song,
Yes.
and Wormick.
Yes. Moving on to item 2A, which is a public hearing. Global Go LLC on behalf of Breeze Hill Farm for a conditional use permit application to operate a Type 7 volatile salt and cannabis manufacturing and distribution facility within the 9,386 square foot industrial building located at 19115 Newhall Street. And just for the information of the commission, this is not a major architectural application, so we're only looking at the negative deck and the conditional use permit. Can I have a staff report, please?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission, and thank you for that clarification. So the item you have before you today is a conditional use permit request by Breeze Hill Farm Incorporated for a cannabis manufacturing Type 7 CUP request. And as you mentioned, the building, which is a 9,386 square foot building, has been previously reviewed and approved under pursuant to section 94.0400 of our code. And so the only item that you have today is to consider the proposed negative declaration pursuant to CEQA guidelines and, of course, the CUP use itself. So before I move ahead, I just want to share some of the some slides with you. So you're currently looking at the overview of the vicinity where this site is located. It is zoned M2 and within the cannabis overlay zone. It is north of the I-10 and west of North Indian Canyon Drive. The area is predominantly used for energy-related industries and some light industrial uses too. Currently, as I mentioned in the staff report, the site is vacant, it's undeveloped. However, the city has reviewed plan checks and some other technical studies for the site. So those are all ongoing. Other prior actions before now, the city did issue a regulatory permit for the applicant on December 9, 2019, and the minor architectural application for the building itself was approved also in December of 2019. This is the rendering of how the building will look like upon completion. And this is a site plan of the site. I just want to make clear that going through the initial study, you will notice that the analysis was for 2 buildings, and that was because the owner did own the site to the north of this particular site in the past. I'm not sure if that's still the case. However, you're only reviewing the CUP for 1 building of that is totaling 9,386 square in size. And these are the floor plans for the first floor and the second floor. It detailed the uses in each of the spaces where the distribution, manufacturing, and offices will be located. The applicant did submit an odor control plan that was reviewed and approved by the city's odor control consultant. This is slightly different. I did include some of the components of the odor control plan in the staff report. Because this is a new building, the HVAC that is proposed to be installed here will be effective according to the applicant. So the odor control plan, odor control consultant will be also available to answer any of your questions that you may have there. However, the plan was reviewed and approved by the city. In looking at the odor control plan, staff is going to be recommending 2 additional conditions that were not contained in your report. The first one is a 6-month review of the project once it is in operation. And the second one is relative to the location of the butane fuel tank. So in the CEQA analysis, that was discussed. However, there wasn't any mitigation measure recommended for it. It was determined that the butane fuel tank be located at the southwest of the site. Let me go back to the happening. Okay, I'm sorry, my presentation just went off the screen. I was just going to point out the location that was recommended by the CEQA analyst where the butane tank will be located. Also, just to notice that it is a type 7 that was approved for this site. That type does allow the use of solvents, volatile solvents for the use. Staff did make findings in support of the CUP, and also there were additional conditions that were imposed to ensure public safety and welfare at the site. There was a question regarding the conditions that were imposed by the fire department, and so we have a staff from the fire department that will answer any of the questions that the commission may have tonight. In conclusion, the site is again appropriately zoned for the use. It is also within the cannabis overlay zone, and as a result, staff is comfortable making a recommendation for approval for this project. So that will conclude my staff report, and staff is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Madam Chair, as I had indicated, Nicole Christ, who was our CEQA consultant, must leave the meeting by about 5 to 6. So if there could be any questions for our CEQA consultant to start with, and then we'll be able to take questions for both our fire official and our odor control consultant following that.
Why don't we go in that order? We'll hear from Nicole Christ and then ask questions. The fire department will be here. We'll ask questions, the odor control, and then we'll go back to questions of staff. Nicole?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'm really here to answer questions. I will point out that when we did this initial study, that the use was not specified. It was to be cannabis cultivation and manufacturing, but there was no user. It was a speculative building at the time. And so we analyzed on the basis of the information that was provided by the owner at the time, which was to be part a manufacturing facility and part a cultivation facility. Since then, the plans that you have before you are much more specific because they're user driven. However, we did look at the issues associated with the hazards for the use of solvents, the separation, the construction of a facility like this is regulated. So they will have to meet city and particularly fire department standards for safety. I understand that there is some concern about the use of butane. These are generally closed when the types of manufacturing processes that these facilities use are closed loop systems. They are highly regulated, both by the state and local. And we did find that the potential impacts were less than significant on that basis. And I'm glad to answer any other questions the commission may have.
Are there questions from the commission? Commissioner Song.
I believe Michael had his hand first.
Oh, I can't see it. Sorry. Commissioner Hirschbein?
Mr. Hirschbein,
your
you'll need to
mic- your-
unmute.
Sorry. The butane tank that was referenced that you requested to be moved, can you tell us why you requested it to be moved?
We did not request it to be moved, sir. It was located there on the plans, on the original plans.
Oh, well, I thought...
under which we were operating at the time, and it separates it from the building.
Oh, okay. I thought staff said there was a request that it be moved.
It was analyzed that way in the CEQA on the basis that it would be separate from the building.
And so it was moved away from the building? Is that, I don't get you.
And pardon me for my stumbling. We wrote this a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. Let me bring up my initial study for a moment. the plans analyzed in the initial study showed a butane tank at the southwest corner of the site that was to be installed and shielded per city standards.
So I know we're not supposed to ask staff, but staff mentioned there was a request to move the butane storage. Was that staff's request then? And we'll ask staff.
Madam Chair, may I come in, please? No, there was no such a request to move the butane tank. As a matter of fact, I am proposing a condition of approval that was not included in the staff report to make to ensure that the butane is located at that site at the southwest corner of the site. No, they are not.
All right, well then I'm mistaken then. I'm sorry. I'll withdraw the question. Sorry.
All right.
Madam Chair, if there are no more questions of...
I'm sorry, there are more questions. Commissioner Song was next. Commissioner Lewin, you'll be after that.
Good evening, Nicole. I think this is more of an administrative question, but the CEQA initial study is based on 2 sites. This project is specific to 1 site. Are the conditional use permit reports specific enough that it would preclude the second site from the initial CEQA study? So therefore, there is no confusion that we're only approving one of the 2 buildings for this use.
No, ma'am. Under CEQA, the city is to review the whole of an action as early as possible in the process. And at the time, there was a plan for a second building immediately adjacent to this building. And the proper CEQA procedure was to look at both so that all of the impacts of the eventual total action would be analyzed. If the second building is eventually constructed and no conditions have changed, this CEQA document can be used for that application as well. There is no requirement under CEQA that a project, on the contrary, that a project be bifurcated for when one building goes ahead and the other does not.
Madam Chair, just to clarify Commissioner Song's question, in the conditions of approval, it is specific to the manufacturing use for this specific site. So although the CEQA analysis includes additional activities in the conditions of approval, it is specific to this building and the manufacturing use only. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewin?
I just want to say that I believe that the staff, city staff, planning staff, the police, the fire department have all done their due diligence. And I am in support of this application.
We're not at that point.
No, I want the other commissioners to know I'm good to go.
The comment isn't yet in order. I have a couple of questions. The staff report said, you said that butane was inert, and our reports say it's volatile. And there's not just butane, but there's ethanol. So can you explain why you said it was inert? And then would the addition of ethanol change your findings?
The answer to your second question is no. The addition of and I will be clear, ethanol is not being added to the butane. These are 2 separate processes handled with 2 separate manufacturing processes and 2 separated equipment. The in hindsight being 2020, the wording in the hazard section is poor. The intent of that sentence was to say that in a closed system, the butane is not exposed to other items that would cause it to become to flame or to explode. That is the advantage of the closed systems that are used for these kinds of processes.
I guess my question is, you said the wording was unfortunate. Does the wording need to be changed as we accept your report?
That's up to you, ma'am. We certainly can if you'd like.
Okay.
I don't think that it affects the findings of the study.
Flynn, as we're dealing with this, can we hold on to that language?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. What we will do, if there is an action to approve this item, we will correct the language with the direction of Ms. Christ in doing so.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Commission, I apologize for the rush, but I now have to run to a Planning Commission meeting in India. Thank goodness for Zoom Planning Commission. Have a good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Takix from our consultant, our odor control consultant. He is now available for questions if you would like to direct those questions to him.
What I would like to do instead is, if the member of the fire department is available,
Yes.
go from Ms.
We'll have Mr. Stephen Otero come to the podium. He is here in council chambers, and he is available for your questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just for the rest of the commission, we had one of these before us in a neighborhood before that was a type 7. The commission at that point was concerned that we'd had nothing in the report regarding the steps the fire department takes, and, you know, given the volatile substances and also the very recent explosion in Los Angeles in an unlicensed facility. So if the fire department person is here, can he come to the podium, please?
Yes, he is here at the podium and is available for your questions. If you'd like to go ahead and begin.
Thank you. Is he on TV with us?
No, he is here in chambers, so he is standing at the podium. Go ahead and begin your questions now.
Okay, if you'd introduce yourself, please.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Stephen Otero. I work with Palm Springs Fire as a fire plans examiner.
And Mr. Otero, can you explain to us what steps you take with a project like this and when you do your review, and how assured we can be that the neighborhood that this is in will be safe from explosion?
Sure. So to address the fire, you mentioned the explosion in Los Angeles. That was not an extraction. That was an illegal storage of small butane canisters that they were storing unpermitted. The city didn't know they were there, and they ended up having a fire. It was the smaller canisters of butane that they had. Once they concluded their investigation, that's what they determined was the cause of the explosion. So it was not from an extraction. So when we're doing our review during the planning phase, I condition the structure, the architectural plans, and what we do in order to ensure that the extraction is conducted safely. It's treated as a deferred submittal. There's a lot of information that has to be on the extraction plans, and we separated it, which is a common practice. I came from Riverside County Fire, and I did the same thing in Desert Hot Springs with several extractions, and it cleans it up. It makes it easier since there's so much information that they have to submit. We treat it as deferred submittal, so we're going to get a plan from a mechanical engineer and architect, and they're going to show us how they meet the fire code, and all the NFPA standards that apply when it comes to an extraction. In addition to that, the fire code, they also require a mechanical engineer to design the plan, and they require that same mechanical engineer to come out to the site to do an inspection of the installation to make sure it's into plan. And then that's when we go out from the fire department and we do a walkthrough with that same mechanical engineer. We do our function test to make sure it's all into code. And then at that time, we're able to final it. And that's why in your architectural review, in the comments that I provided, it refers them to our technical standard that we adopted locally. And we also let them know that it has to be submitted as a deferred submittal, just like we do with our fire sprinklers, fire alarm, on-site water for hydrants, et cetera.
And can you explain deferred submittal to us for those of us who are not architects?
Sure. So deferred submittal, essentially, when we get architectural plans, there's a section on the title page titled deferred submittal. The architect's essentially telling us that those are not included in this plan set, being the architectural plans, that they're going to be submitted at a later time because it's a separate person typically that is designing. For instance, with the extraction plans, it's a mechanical engineer usually working with a separate architect, sometimes the same architect. And we're able to get all the information we need cleaned up, because we have to go out and do several inspections under that one permit rather than putting it under the building permit. We create a completely separate permit so we can clean up the process.
And are there other questions? I have one more that I'd like to follow up with. It doesn't look like in our conditions there's a condition for a deferred submittal and for what you require in the approvals that we're giving.
Okay, let me see. Do we have a copy of those here? Okay, give me 1 minute here. Let me review it. Okay, so under comment number 15 from the fire department, it's referring to our local ordinance for plant processing and extraction, technical policy listed 16-002, requirements apply for plant processing and extraction. And you're correct, it doesn't specifically say that it's a deferred submittal. Essentially, we're pointing them to this local requirement, local ordinance that we created. But essentially, we could definitely adjust that language in the future and specifically say it's a deferred submittal per this section, but it is treated as a deferred submittal once they submit their official plans.
And Madam Chair, we'd be happy to make that correction now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of our speaker? There being none, I think you've answered our questions. Thank you very much. Flynn, we have a third speaker.
Yes, we have our odor control consultant, and Mr. Jay is available to take your questions if you have questions about the odor control plan.
Thank you. Are there questions? If you would come, is he here?
He is on the Zoom.
If you could state your name. I think if you're speaking, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Jay Tackus with 15,000 Incorporated. Good afternoon.
Are there questions of the odor control consultant? Commissioner Song.
Yes, Mr. Tackus, I just have a question about your, or the design there have an exhaust fan. I believe it is an exhaust on the east wall where the door entrance is. It seems that all the equipment that are on the roof, and the electrical and the connections to the air handler units are all on the roof, but I see the exhaust fan coming off from the side of the wall. Is there any concern about the odors that they're using? I know they're going through the carbon system and the filtering system and so on. But is it such that by the time the air is leaving the building, it's already scrubbed?
Yes, it is already scrubbed. It's the odor control plan that they submitted with that process beginning last year in December demonstrates that they are compliant with all the requirements for the carbon filtration and cleaning of the airstream. To give you, if you don't mind me volunteering, a little bit of information about the mechanical engineering system behind these, just because we do this as our day job as well, is Type 7 volatile extraction facilities are mandated by code to maintain what's called an LFL. It's a lower flammability level of whatever the airstream carrying a potential accidental discharge of a solvent would have. So in general, these systems in an extraction facility normally discharge very diluted air because we're trying to keep the mechanical engineer is trying to keep the airflow by itself diluted before it leaves the building, but the entirety of that is being captured and sent through a carbon scrubber as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? I have one, which is the odor control in this area. Are you doing it to a lower standard than you would have done in some of the neighborhoods that we saw recently?
Yes and no. No, we are not. This is hinged to the older non-dilution standards that were in effect prior to 2020. The original application submittal on this is, I don't know what the exact date is, but it was our first communication I'm looking at here. Looks like mid-October. So these requirements are the previous requirements, not the enhanced odor. So no, these are not the same systems that would be specified now, but they are compliant with the old regulations.
And what's the difference between what the requirements now are in the older regime?
There are several subtle differences that include like building pressurization and sealing of the building and some testing requirements and also some performance characteristics regarding the amount of carbon. We take a little bit of that out of the hands at the time and make sure that we're meeting some industrial standards. The biggest one, however, is dilution. In the new requirements, we require a 7-to-1 dilution rate for any discharge air leaving a building. In this case, it's following the old requirements, which does not require dilution rate. However, this being a volatile extraction, that airstream is already diluted by code in order to keep the flammability level of any accidental butane within the airstream down to a minimum.
And what would the dilution rate be under what's required by code?
Right now, the dilution rate is what the mechanical engineer on this job will have to maintain in the airstream is what's called a 25% LFL, which means the air will have to be diluted down to 25% of whatever the flammability level of that material would be. So if there was an accidental discharge of butane for whatever reason, the exhaust system does not contain a explosive amount of butane. So it's not a quantity or a rate, the dilution is set based on a percentage of its actual explosivity and it being able to blow up.
Okay.
That's part of that deferred submittal that the fire inspector was referring to, that those systems are part of that.
And do you know if the applicant was ever asked to use the current standards?
I do not know if they were asked or not. No.
Are there, Commissioner Hirschbein, and you're muted.
Yes, thank you. So I wasn't going to ask any questions at all because I thought it was kind of a slam dunk, but uncovering the notion that they're not complying with current odor control standards sort of woke me up, I guess. Can you qualitatively describe what the actual effect would be outside of the building, downwind from the building, in terms? Sorry?
No, I cannot quantitatively describe that.
So what you're saying is there's no way of telling us whether the old odor control requirements would lead to more or the same amount of odor leaving the site.
In that respect, I can tell you the new requirements are more stringent.
So that's all you can say, though. You can't say.
Yeah, I don't know if they're 10% better or they're more stringent.
Say again, I'm sorry?
I don't know what percentage better it is, but they are more stringent.
Okay. And I guess this is a follow-up to staff. Could the Planning Commission require that the new standards be applied?
To respond to the question, as a conditional use permit and a discretionary item, yes, you could require that they adhere to the 2020 standard.
And another follow-up to the consultant, how different, I know it's a little bit hard to say, how different would the mechanical drawings and calculations be if we were to require that? In other words, is it just manipulating a few numbers and sizing a duct to different size, or are we talking about throwing everything away and starting over?
That's a means and method answer. I can't tell you what this engineer or any other engineer would do to adapt this design to the new requirements, but I can tell you what I would do. I would, if my charge was to adapt this design to the new requirements prior, I would change out the exhaust fan to a dilution fan, and that would get us 90% there. The other requirements are going to be building, sealing, administrative things that we just need to make sure that they take care of. But there's, for lack of a better term, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can get to that solution more than one way. So I don't want to speak for the mechanical engineer, but the impact to the, what's that? The impact to the building, I don't know. It would be adding a dilution fan at the minimum, 2 of them, because there's 2 hoods.
Okay. Well, that kind of helps me out in understanding that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Unmute when I talk. Are there any other questions? There being none, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. You all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Okay, this is going back to staff. If there are questions, are there any questions of staff, or have we gone far enough with the consultants? Seeing no questions of staff, I'd like to open the public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
If the applicant is here, you have 10 minutes to present. Flynn, do you know if there's any public testimony?
Madam Chair, we haven't had any members of the public request to speak under this item. We do have Ms. Ivy Bader and Ms. Alicia Richardson Ellis, who are the applicants.
Okay. If you would introduce yourself, you have 10 minutes. And then if you would stay, we may have questions.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. So my name is Ivy Bader. I work with Global Go, who is representing Alicia Richardson, who's also here tonight. She is the applicant for Breeze Hills Farm, number 1.
There's too much echoing. It's echoing. It's hard to hear.
Ivy, if you have the Planning Commission on your computer screen, you might turn that volume down and just use the Zoom.
Okay, I'm muted right now. Are you still getting feedback? Yes.
The sound is better.
Okay. So I'm Ivy. I'm with Global Go, and we are representing Breeze Hill Farms, and the owner of Breeze Hill Farms is Alicia Richardson, who's also here today. I want to go ahead and give a little bit of texture or color to this project. So the hours of operations will be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. The plan is to have between 6 and 10 employees. This is a manufacturing type 7 with volatile solvents license, as well as distribution, transportation and distribution. And the types of goods that will be made will be edibles, concentrates, topicals, vapes, cartridges, tinctures, infused pre-rolls. We have satisfied all of the parking requirements, and in fact, we've exceeded the parking requirements by 1. We are offering 12 regular parking spaces and 1 ADA compliant parking space. For the manufacturing portion of the building, there will be roughly 5,000 square feet dedicated to extraction area, office and lobby, ADA restroom, a break room, locker room, mechanical room, and there's plenty of storage, especially on the second floor. For distribution, we're going to have about 4,000 square feet or so, and that includes a roll-up door where a van can go inside and deliver the goods. Let's see here. This particular property is over a mile away from any residential zones. I think the closest neighborhood is in North Palm Springs. It's kind of at the corner of Indian Canyon and Dillon. And that is roughly 1.5 miles away, well over 1,000 feet, which is the regulation. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and end it there. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Are there questions of the applicant? There being none, I have one, which is following up on the odor control specialist who talked with us. Would you have a problem with us requiring the 2 dilution fans?
We would accept those conditions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, based on your discussion and your comments thus far, it appears that you have 3 additional conditions that you'd like to add. Let me just go through those briefly. Number 1 is to correct the language in the initial study as directed by Ms. Christ, as we discussed earlier. Number 2 is to correct the language in fire condition number 15 relative to the deferred submittal. And then number 3 is relative to the odor control plan that the applicant adhere to the 2020 standards as just indicated by having the additional dilution fans. So those would be the 3 added conditions based on your comments thus far.
Commission, and this matter is before the commission. Commissioner Hirschbein, you're muted.
So rather than specifying the dilution fans, which I don't really even know what those are, but our consultant, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, indicated that he used the saying there's more than one way to skin a cat. I would like to leave how they skin that cat up to their mechanical engineer and simply reference the new requirements.
So noted, Mr. Hirschbein.
I'm wondering if there's any comments, or if not, I could take a motion.
I think that the chair and the commission has brought up a few very important details, and I would move approval of this project with the conditions as noted by the director, Flynn Fagg.
Is there a second to the motion?
Project.
I will second that.
Great. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Ervin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Lewin,
Yes.
Commissioner Song,
Yes.
and Chair Wormick.
Yes,
Motion,
that's unanimous. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Invite us to the opening.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay. We are at item 3, which is a discussion on Planning Commission meeting procedures. Director Fagg was gracious enough to write a memo for us. Flynn, would you like to go through that?
I'll go through it very quickly, and then, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you for discussion. In terms of the direction from our last Planning Commission meeting, it was requested that we might suggest ways that we might be more efficient in running our meetings in terms of the overall meeting length. With evening meetings, sometimes we do go a little bit late, and it does make it difficult to really put forth our best effort in terms of reviewing applications and crafting the best conditions. So with that in mind, I've suggested a number of things that you all can look at in terms of how we could be more efficient, and I'll just go through those very briefly and then again turn it back to the chair. First, in terms of one of the things that we can do is we can place more items on the consent agenda. The consent agenda, we don't do staff reports, we don't go into discussion of those items, and typically those are items where there are conditions of approval in place that don't really require any added discussion. And so one way to perhaps speed the process is to place more items on the consent agenda. One of the things I need to note is that public hearing items cannot be placed on the consent agenda. Those have to have the public hearing opened and take testimony, and so consequently we can't put public hearing items on a consent agenda, but there are other items that we can, so that's one thing that we can look at. The second thing is in terms of staff presentations, we typically do a relatively detailed presentation to you. One of the things that we could do to cut down the length of time is to just go into a description of the project briefly and then go through the findings and any conditions of approval. The third thing that you can look at doing, this is something that the City Council has done, is to limit the time for public testimony. I will, however, tell you that this has not been a very popular item. At City Council meetings, you will hear people stating that they are not happy with the 2-minute time limit. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, especially at Planning Commission, where having additional presentation by the applicant or testimony from applicants or members of the public is critical in your decision making. So again, that is a possibility, but I don't encourage it just based on the comments that we've had at the City Council meetings. Finally, in terms of other things you can do, in the bylaws for Planning Commission, we have outlined the procedures for public hearings. While the actual public hearing portion itself, where we take testimony, is critical, we could cut down things such as the questions for staff and the applicant, perhaps combining those instead of separating those. That might be a little bit more efficient. The other thing is looking at your discussion and your action. Ultimately, in terms of these 4 different suggestions, the way to have shorter meetings is for everyone to talk less. And so if I could summarize anything, it's to talk less, and that gets us through meetings more quickly. So either by putting things on the consent agenda, cutting down on presentation times, things like that, that helps us get through meetings more efficiently. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation to you. Happy to consider any suggestions you all might have, and so I turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there comments? I have comments about it, but Commissioner Song?
My evaluation is that since COVID, we haven't had that many public testimonies. I think where it has taken time is the fact that we have to call the public comment person to bring them in, but they haven't been that many, and they have been mostly written as well. So on that part, I'm perfectly fine leaving the things as they are. I do like the idea of combining the questions to the applicant and the staff at one time. Also because it gives me the excuse that sometimes I don't know if the question is for the staff or for the applicant. So it will give one time for the right person to answer to those questions. Those are the comments I have.
Other comments? Commissioner Hirschbein, Commissioner Irvin, and then Commissioner Lewin.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of ironic that we're spending time talking about how to shorten meetings, but I like some of these ideas. I like trying to get more stuff on the consent calendar. I think that could help. Flynn, I just wanted to ask you, if we opened up a public hearing prior to the consent calendar and let people speak on an item, would that allow it to go to consent?
No, I wouldn't recommend that. I think for the ability to preserve the record, it's important that you take public hearing testimony with the item as it's opened. So I would again state that we need to have public hearing items as a separate item, and we shouldn't place those on the consent agenda.
All right. And then as far as staff presentations, I generally agree that they could be shortened a little bit. In certain circumstances, I think we could, from my experience, there's projects that are sort of less complicated, less in-depth need for explanation and review. And then there's projects that need more explanation and review. So if we adopt some guidelines that say let's shorten discussion or shorten staff reports, I'd like to make sure that we have the ability to let staff know that there's certain projects that there are certain projects that we do want to hear a little bit more in depth. And I don't know if it's up to staff to sort of grade them A and B projects, but certainly some of them can be abbreviated. Some of them I think need more in-depth analysis by staff for us to understand them. As far as the time limits for testimony, I would agree that 2 minutes for public comment is too short. You're kind of just getting wound up by the time the second minute goes through. So I would say let's keep that to 3, and it's not that big of a deal. I think there's two kind of levels of applicants. There's some much more complicated than others, but I think generally restricting it to 5 minutes is a good idea with the understanding that I think the commission chairperson could extend it to 10 under their discretion. And then if number 4, if it does lead to streamlined, it reduces the amount of time, I'm up for number 4 as well, if staff thinks it could reduce the amount of time. So those are my comments.
Commissioner Irvin?
I would agree with Commissioner Song. I think we should just maybe speak a little less. And also, I wouldn't be in support of the public comments, shorten it. Sometimes, people get going, like Commissioner Hirschbein said, they get going and start speaking. And we don't want to, cut that off. And then I also wouldn't want to put public comments on the consent calendar just because, we want to hear what the public has to say. And I do agree with the combining of the applicant and the staff together. That way, like Maria said, we can ask those questions together and then see what question is for who and give them opportunity to answer. So that's just my comments.
Commissioner Lewin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Without a doubt, I don't think we should limit any public testimony at all. Our job is to sit and listen to the public input as well as the staff input But I do think the staff has the skill set to decide what should be on the consent calendar and what should be a public hearing. And I would defer to staff. Many things that can be on consent calendar should be. Tonight is a great example of what they decided should be on the consent calendar. And all of us that are on the commission have the right to pull any item from consent for a bigger discussion at our will. So I would encourage staff to just put as much on consent as possible, and we can conduct our business as smoothly as possible. And we should not limit any public testimony in any way, shape, or form. Thank you very much.
The only item in this that I would limit my off mute, is the staff presentations. Not the staff presentations. I actually like the questions of staff ahead of public testimony because it really focuses what we need to ask of the applicant. So I think they're two entirely different functions, and I wouldn't combine them. We ask questions of the applicant. On the commission, many years we didn't do it. We do it now to get it as a piece of the public record in case there are questions of the applicant. It's not actually, in the past, there were very few that we did. But I think, I review with Flynn the agenda. I go over it with him for an hour on Tuesdays ahead of the meeting and try and determine which reports we want of staff. We could pretty much add to that which staff reports should be shorter or longer, and try and do it that way. But I am just, in general, I wouldn't limit public testimony. I think anything we can put on the consent agenda is a good thing to do. We have done that on occasion with our addition onto it, but I wouldn't separate questions. And talking less, and as the chair, I can try and lead so that we don't go into discussions we don't. If something looks like it's pretty cut and dry, try and call the questions faster.
Let's see. Something else that slows down the meeting sometimes is we get, I do this too, or a lot, I have in the past anyway, is I kind of jump the gun and I go into the next phase of the hearing before we're into that. For instance, is making comments in the question phase. And you can make a comment in a form of a question. We all know that. So I think for us internally, speeding it along would be making sure what we're saying is in context of where we are in the process.
Yeah, I do think that speeds it up. Commissioner Lewin.
Madam Chair, I think you run a terrific meeting. We are doing very difficult work, which is to take somebody's vision of building something out of nothing or something out of something that has fallen apart and make it great. So we can't write a bunch of rules. I think you run a great meeting. The staff does a great job. My literal only personal view is whatever could be put on the consent calendar would speed things up, because then it would be up to one of us to say, I have an issue, I've read this consent calendar item, I want to call it up for further discussion. Outside of that, I really think the city and you as the chair are running a very, very good meeting. So I would advance the idea that we instruct staff to put on the consent calendar whatever is reasonable to put on the consent calendar, and everything else should follow regular rules of order. Idea.
Is there, generally, where are we with this? Glenn, do you have enough direction?
Yes, I do. So what we will look at doing is, number one, we will look to place more items on the consent calendar. Number two, we will be a little bit more structured in our staff presentations, shorten those that don't need to be lengthy, while at the same time recognizing that certain applications are more complex and do need some additional discussion. So those are the two principal things that we will do. There was not consensus on combining both staff and applicant questions. So I will defer to you, Madam Chair, in terms of how you would like to do that. But otherwise, I think that's direction for us, for staff.
Thank you. We are at Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments. Are there any from the commissioners? Commissioner Song.
Should we include very briefly on cases that the commission has not has rejected and cases that have gone to city council and what their results or findings were as a close loop to the process of the project, much like a quick report. We don't have to discuss them, but to see what the end of a case was?
I think that's a good idea. I don't know, Flynn, are you comfortable doing that?
Yes, and I'd be happy to do that when we get to Planning Director's report. I'll report on 3 cases that the City Council has considered or will consider. So yes, happy to do that.
We probably have 2 reports on meetings that we had. Maria, do you want to give just a very quick report on the meeting we had on the with an applicant regarding circulation last week?
Sure. So as you all know, the Raising Cane and as well as the Starbuck project, the Starbuck. Even though there were no issues and we were very clear on the conditions, they had brought it up at the end of the review. But the first review, sorry, I'm having a bad connection. The first review was about Raising Cane. And to be honest with you, I was feeling apologetic towards the applicant that we were asking them to do more work. But they have done it. They have come up with 2 designs in which it respected mainly the already grown and luscious landscape, and to also give us a report of those landscape features that are not working. And they should have done that exercise from the very beginning, I believe, but the outcome was very favorable in which they did consider the comments we have, and having the chair of AAC also there and review the upgrades and the improvement on the design really made the process a win-win for, I think, all sides. And it is going to be much more improved project with a safer configuration and circulation for traffic. So it was a not contentious, but it was a project that we were trying out a new timeline, a new methodology of having AAC review it and then Planning Commission. But at the end, I believe that sticking to what the findings were and what the issues were, that we wanted the applicant to do a much better job in bringing this project that is so prevalent on Ramon, which is one of the busy streets in Palm Springs.
The only report I have is that the general plan update went to City Council. It came back asking us to do more work and more outreach. They had questions and comments, but didn't finalize their comments. And Flynn can talk more about that. It'll go. We'll continue to work on it. Commissioner Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this discussion because we need to know if we're doing a good job for the city council. And I think it would be useful to have on this agenda, well, sorry about the background, a report of which decisions were overturned and which decisions were upheld by the council. By default, the city council does not review our work, but from time to time, they decide that we did not achieve the community's objectives. I think that's what we're trying to find out, right? When we swing and hit and when we swing and miss. And so if it was just simply written down as part of the director's report, not as a verbal report, because that's a very difficult thing to do for the director. A written report. You voted on this, commission, and it was overturned by the city council on this date. Then it becomes just not a dialogue, but more of a record for all of us to understand as we seek to implement the will of the city council over time. And I want to make sure that what I'm trying to say is I don't believe it's the director's job to verbalize the city council's will. It's more like it's just written down that we voted one way and it is recorded that it was overturned another way. It's for us to discuss and learn from.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, with all due respect, I never viewed my job here on Planning Commission as implementing council's will. I think we're all here to independently evaluate a project on its merits, given our experience and coming to a conclusion. So although I am very interested in what the council does or doesn't do when a project that we've reviewed comes before them, I don't see it as something that I'm going to learn how to do something that then complies with what they're looking for. I just never viewed that as my role here.
Commissioner Lowen, this is...
Thank you for the opportunity for dialogue. Commissioner Hirschbein, I think you're right. I think I misspoke. Our job is to do what we're told to do, to interpret the applicant's application. What is useful is to have a regular system from the city government, a feedback loop that tells us when we are overturned and when we're not. And I think your point is well taken. It is not our job to do what the elected officials want, but we do need a feedback loop that is non-judgmental, that tells us when we're overturned. That's the only thing. We've been hearing it hearsay and part and parcel versus part of a regular staff report, which is these are the things that you voted on and these are the things that were upheld and overturned. And I'm trying to create a neutral moment where we just learn that information. And your point, Commissioner Hirschbein, is well taken. I'm sorry for saying what I said that way.
Madam Chair.
So I agree 100%. It'd be useful to know what you're requesting. I totally agree with that.
Madam Chair, what I might suggest, based on the input that I've heard this evening, we prepare an action summary after Historic Site Preservation Board and Planning Commission meetings and post those on the city website. What we might do as well is basically do an action summary of council items that Planning Commission has made recommendations on. And that's a simple report that we could provide to you as part of your agenda package. So I think it's a good suggestion, and it's something that's fairly simple for staff to do. So we could go ahead and begin and perhaps have one for the next meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? There being no other comments, we are now at the Planning Director's report.
So, Madam Chair, I have 4 items. Let me start first. On the October 28th Planning Commission meeting, we would like to have a study session prior to that meeting. What I would suggest is that we start the study session at 4 p.m. Would that work for folks? And I'm thinking of working folks. Mr. Lewin, Mr. Irvin, Ms. Song.
Yes, I will make arrangements with my employer.
Yeah, I'll be fine.
Okay.
Director Powell, yeah, I'll do it.
Okay. So we will have a study session. And
What is the topic?
we have two items. We have an affordable housing project at the corner of Stevens and North Palm Canyon. And then we also have a study session on the proposed housing on the former Virgin Hotel site.
And what is the, will the public be invited to speak on that as well?
Public may offer comments at the beginning of the study session, as is typical of our format.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item that I have for you is several months ago, we had two cell tower items. The Planning Commission asked if staff would do an inspection of existing monopalm towers. There were concerns about maintenance of monopalm towers. Staff has gone out and inspected all of those. There were a couple where they are missing fronds, and so we have forwarded those to our code compliance division. Others were found to be in compliance with the approved plans and maintenance. So I just wanted you to know that we've gone out and inspected all of those. The next item is relative to City Council action on Planning Commission cases. Earlier this year, you all denied an application for a new 7-Eleven at the corner of Racket Club and North Palm Canyon. The item was appealed by the applicant. That was recently heard by the City Council. They also denied the application. There are two other items that have been requested for council review. One is the VIP Motors case on Matthew Drive, which was the auto storage lot. That one will go to the City Council on October the 22nd. And then the second item is the Tower Market case. That one has been called forward to City Council, and that will be reviewed tentatively on November 12th. So those are recent actions of Planning Commission that have gone forward to City Council or will go forward to City Council. The final item that I have for you this evening, I just wanted to announce that Mr. David Newell has been promoted to Assistant Director of the Planning Division. With the consolidation of planning, engineering, building, and sustainability, it does create the need to have a management level position in the Planning Division, and Mr. Newell has been promoted to that position and will take a larger role in planning activities here in the city of Palm Springs, as I will have to focus my efforts on the other divisions within the department from time to time. That is all that I have, and thank you all, and we appreciate your dedication to the Planning Commission.
Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned until 4 o'clock on October 28th, 2020. Good evening.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye.
Madam Chair and staff and commissioners, pleasure